Very happy to have this space, this day together with you. And I just want to begin by saying thank you for contributing your day to your community together in this space. So would you just give yourself a round of applause? Every beautiful day we wake up, and by definition, waking up is a beautiful day, right? We get to choose how we're going to spend the day. And to spend it together like this is a wonderful choice. I am the executive director of Florida Council of Churches, which is the mainline Protestant denominations in Florida that try to gather together on occasion to do something good for everybody. And I pretty much operate an awful lot without talking with the denominational leaders. That's okay. We all find ourselves in a space like that, working beyond our organization, right? And today, that's exactly the place I'm hoping everyone will go. Beyond your organization, beyond whatever your normal identity is, and enter into this new space together where we can talk about changing the narrative. And there's been a group of us who've been meeting since August trying to design this day together. And I would just like those who have been part of that design to show themselves, stand up and, do the wave so people can see who you are. I'm going to introduce everyone. So thank you very much. Hold on a second, I gotta reinitialize what I'm doing here, because it went to sleep on me. I come out of a tradition, there's a famous line that says, "The poor will always be with you." That's a choice of translation. And that translation has come from the standard narrative that we're all used to. And we'll be talking more about that. But there's another way of understanding it. And that's saying, can be translated as "you will always be with the poor." Wow! That changes the frame, doesn't it? You can always be with the poor. And whenever you do, you can do well by that. So there's a metric there about society. It does well by the poor, not the normal narrative that we hear. As our design team was talking about things, this is how we sort of talked about narrative. And Susan's going to tell us more, we'll have more conversation about it. But at various places along the way, we find ourselves at one of those concentric circles. They all tie together, they all interrelate, they integrate. And so how we understand needs is driven by what our ideology, the structures are, how we define vision, change the narrative, everything else in those concentric circles changes too. I'm just sharing with you sort of the assumptions that have brought the design team together. And without much further ado, I want to introduce you, if you don't know her already, Susan Greenbaum, who deserves applause. And I look forward to learning from her and from you and from everybody else in this room how we stop blaming the poor and start living with the poor. Susan.
See if I can get this adjusted so I can hear. Won't turn on. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. I'm an anthropologist, and anthropologists do their research a little differently from other people who are associated with the study of urban poverty. And I think the difference is part of where my different ideas about this came from. I don't want to give too much credit to my discipline, but I do love it, so I don't mind. Anthropology is based on the fact that we don't know much, and the people that we think we want to know about are the ones who teach us what things are about. That we go into the field, as we call it, with very few preconceived notions, and that we acquire understanding by interacting with and listening to and thinking about the importance of what people have been experiencing. Now, most poverty researchers don't do it that way. They gather together statistics, and they do regression analyses, and they do growth curve analyses, and they do a whole host of very sophisticated analyses to discover that if you're poor, you're probably also miserable. If you're poor, it's likely that you didn't get a very good education. If you're poor, you may live in a family where there's only one parent, and it's usually a struggling mom. And all of these correlations are then brought together with a notion that, well, it's the single mothers who are struggling that are causing the problems, because they're not raising their children properly, and therefore their children grow up to be unsuited to join the workforce or to be good parents themselves. Now, this is the myth that has prevailed for a very long time in our society. It's a myth that I've been studying fairly actively in the last couple of years. It's partly the luxury of having been able to retire from the university and contemplate my experiences. I've been here a very long time. I've been here about 30 years, a little more than 30 years, and during that whole time, I've been working in low-income neighborhoods in Tampa. That's been my research field. I don't go to, the Amazon and get diarrhea and things like that. I stay home and look at my own culture because it's very important and it's very interesting. I've gotten to know a lot of people over the years, a lot of real people who have let me into their lives and taught me about struggle and taught me about the kinds of things that it takes to just get by in a very difficult set of circumstances. And I've also gotten to know a lot of politicians and social service providers and philanthropists, and there are a lot of people in this town who are very serious about helping poor people change their lives. And a lot of them are doing the best they can with very scarce resources. And some of them are doing the best they can with very silly ideas about what it is they're doing and why. Too many come to their work with a vision of charity and paternalism, with the notion that they know what's wrong and that the people who they're working with, the people who are the objects of their charity and paternalism, need to be fixed. And they really don't have much to say about how to do that, because if they were very good at that, they wouldn't be in the fix they're in. So poverty becomes a badge of incapacity, it becomes a badge of failure, and it becomes a badge of shame. And these are the kinds of things that work especially poorly in trying to assemble programs where you rely on people to be sort of part of the process. Not that you're relying on them to tell you about the process or how it ought to work, but rather they're supposed to be compliant. And I've seen too much in the way of social service programming that seems to be founded on this assumption that poor people need to be taught discipline, they need tough love, they need to learn to overcome their dependency, and they need to be more like middle-class people, even if they don't have incomes that qualify them to be in that category. Now, it's my goal this morning to challenge that approach. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a TED Talk over lunch that by Maya Birdsong. Maya Birdsong is a fellow at the Aspen Institute who put together one of these TED Talks. I don't even know what TED stands for. But TED. It's not Ted Turner, I know that. At any rate, it's a big deal, and a lot of serious people watch these things and pay attention. And what she did was she put together a talk about why we think about poor people in the wrong way, and why the examples that she's acquired, similar to the sort of my anthropological approach, actually going out and talking to people and learning about what they're doing, shows that these ideas about poor people being so damaged and so incapable and so inept and all of the other negative things that are said are really a smokescreen for saying, well, they don't deserve help, so we're not going to give them any help. And that is the alternative explanation. That's the conservative line that surrounds this idea that poverty is caused by the bad choices of poor people and the bad values that poor people learn in their families. And so if they're already sort of not going to be contributors to society, and if you give them anything, they just misuse it, so let's just cast them out. For a long time, we went through a very sort of onerous system of welfare, where for very small sums of money, people were asked to surrender their dignity in all kinds of ways, but at least they were getting a little bit of help. In the 80s, that scenario shifted in ways that were even more punitive. We began this process of mass incarceration. We began to lock up the people that we sometimes think of as being surplus labor. We began to create an industry around the locking up of people that we consider to be surplus to our economy that created an engine of growth for the mass incarceration machine. That's one problem that comes out of these views that if poor people are being locked up, well, maybe that's good for society. So what I want to do is I want to talk about Maya Birdsong's very positive and very uplifting vision of what people in poverty are capable of doing, and I want to endorse that view entirely. But then I want to be the Grinch. I want to be the one to talk about the bad things that poverty conveys into the lives of people who experience it, and the reasons that this is happening on a larger scale. There's basically two explanations for poverty. One is bad culture, and the other is structural problems that emanate from an economy that does not provide an adequate living to the people. Am I talking too loud? No. Okay, I'm getting signals back there. I don't quite understand. Okay, I'm not talking into it. All right, now where was I? Anyway, I'm the one who's going to say these things are bad, they're getting worse, and they're coming from sources that are being sort of shadowed and hidden behind the notion that we have so much poverty because poor people don't know how to behave correctly. So that's the thing that we're really talking about when we talk about flipping the script. I want to talk about the items in your handouts, because that's kind of, this is the stuff that we thought you would like to take away. It's sort of like take out for your mind. The first is an item labeled Alice. And I'm not sure if that's first, but it's very prominently labeled Alice. Now, Alice is a study that was done by the United Way. It's still ongoing. And ALICE stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed. Really one of the worst acronyms I can imagine. But what it really is trying to get across is that people who are not making enough money to make ends meet. The poverty rate that you see that's advertised is one that's based on a formula that has a great number of limitations. It's based on a sort of a market basket approach. Here's what it costs to buy things you need, and if you have 4 children, this is what it would cost you to raise those children. And it's a very low estimate. It says that a family of 4 ought to get by on $23,000 a year. That's the limit for poverty. It also doesn't take into account the fact that in Ocoee it costs a whole lot less to live than in Miami or in New York City or in Chicago, and that these things make a difference. So what the United Way did in Alice was they set a formula that looked at localities, census tracts, counties, metropolitan areas, and states, and figured what it costs to live in those places. How much money do you have to earn to be able to rent an apartment, pay for your groceries, pay for your transportation, etc. So Hillsborough County is slightly different from Lakeland, Polk County, other counties, but these are all sort of taken into account. Now, the official poverty rate for Florida is about 15%, which is about the same as the national average. It makes it sound like we're okay. The Alice formula finds that 45% of the households in the state of Florida do not earn enough money to make ends meet. What that says is that a near majority of the people who live in this state are struggling every day against possible disasters that can come from a traffic ticket, a broken down car, any number of things that can plunge people into debt, into despair, and sometimes into homelessness because they simply do not have enough money to pay for those problems that arise, to be able to keep their families fed and living indoors. So if we've got 45% of the population of Florida is not making ends meet, then we need to rethink what we mean by poverty and what we mean by people who are poor. Because that's a lot of our neighbors and kin and friends who are in that situation, and it becomes very hard to maintain the argument that it's their fault. And particularly when you look at what's happened over the last 30 years. Now, the packet doesn't have all the inserts that I intended, so some of what I was going to go through is not available, but they will be on the community engagement website. Now let me first talk about this little article of mine called Debunking the Pathology of Poverty. This is an article I wrote last year, basically in response to Paul Ryan's proposal to privatize everything and take every program that's designed to be part of the safety net and either privatize it or get rid of it. And in his explanation for why that would be a good idea, he invoked the famous Moynihan report and the notion that over in black neighborhoods that are poor, you've got this culture of criminality and dependency, this so-called tangle of pathology, and that's really what's the problem. And so we need to create a situation where those folks will be encouraged to get off the couch and get a job. Or get out of the hammock, as he calls it, and get a job. So I decided that I would challenge that idea, and so I wrote that article, and that's what it's about. I spent a lot of time last year with the Moynihan Report. How many people know what the Moynihan Report is? All right, well, let me explain it very briefly. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, celebrated the lion of the Democratic Party in the Senate. When he was 39 years old, he was in Lyndon Johnson's Labor Department. He wrote an article, or he wrote a report that claimed that black poverty, that was, suddenly the focus of not only the civil rights movement, but the war on poverty, that black poverty was substantially caused by a failed structure of marriages and family. That it was single-headed, female-headed families that were creating people that were really unfit to work, and therefore we had this vicious cycle of dependency and failure that had to be broken somehow, and black people, you should fix that, was basically the message. Now, you know, Moynihan is a controversial figure, and I am not trying to demonize Moynihan. He gave me my first job as a bachelor's degree in sociology. He was a very nice man, but the report that he wrote was terrible. It was bad research. He was very opportunistic in the way he presented it. He leaked it to the press before his colleagues had a chance to read it, and it caused a furor. And it is still going on today. If Paul Bryant can say, well, Moynihan said it, so it must be true, and Barack Obama can say, well, Moynihan said it, so it must be true, then we have a very wide spectrum of people thinking that a very bad idea is actually true. So my goal is to say this is a very bad idea. The alternative is that we have been living through an economy that is reaming out the middle class and dropping out the working class. That poor people are poorer than they used to be, they're struggling more than they used to be, and we need to start thinking about poverty as something that the economy is creating and not something that's coming as a result of bad values, bad habits, bad behavior, bad parents, or any of it. Now, I don't want to suggest that we stop having the kinds of programs that are designed to help people who are poor. We need more of those programs. We need more funding for programs that help with food, that help with daycare, that help with the problems that people have with their lives, that help them connect to the internet when they have to, and a whole host of other things that a lot of the organizations in Tampa are doing. That's good work. What I'm arguing against, and what I really want to help instill in this process, is the end of blaming and shaming. The end of thinking about poor people as somehow lesser participants in this process. The thing that I want to recommend is that we make partnerships with people that we claim we're trying to help. That social service agencies, that the various organizations, philanthropists and volunteers create a much more open process where we have partnerships that can not only help identify what are the real problems that people are experiencing, what are the things that would actually help them solve the problems that they're experiencing, and what are the best ways to get those things delivered. That's the vital information that does not go into the formula of a lot of social programs that come to provide wisdom and uplift to the poor, benighted people that don't know what's good for them. We need to humanize this situation. We need to recognize who are the criminals in our society that caused this situation, and why aren't they being locked up? And I'm talking about bankers and hedge fund managers and various people like that, because that's where poverty and inequality is coming from in our society. That's what happened in 2008. Now, the packet includes a couple of graphs that show these relationships over time. And there were a couple of others that didn't get in that show that from 1980 until the present, the investment in welfare, as it was known at the time and as it's come to be known now as TANF, has gone precipitously down. Not from 1996 when it was so-called reform, but rather this started much earlier. We have been strangling people who are dependent on public assistance. We created in 1996 a system of welfare where we flattened So the idea that the safety net that was supposed to rescue poor people has been deteriorating is one that's illustrated very clearly in these charts and in this piece called 10 Myths About TANF. TANF is the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, and it gives you a rundown of what modern day welfare is and is not. The book that came out recently, Catherine Eden and Luke Schaefer wrote it, called $2 a Day, and that's on the bibliography, illustrates very poignantly and very persuasively how much difficulty has been caused by this tattered safety net that we are still trying to, people are still trying to survive on. I'm not going to talk about the other stuff. I'm going to go right to the end. Am I out of time?
No, go,
Okay.
go.
Actually, I'm going to skip all of this. What I really rather do is have a conversation. I can, university professors are really good at giving lectures. I can go on. I don't think I need to. Basically, what I'm saying is that of the two main explanations that are put forth for the causes of poverty, the one that has culture in it is very flawed. And I'm a cultural anthropologist. I'm a doctor. Take my word. That is a very poor use of the notion of culture. It's become very popular, but it's also, anyway. Put culture off the table. Structure is the problem. Structure is a very difficult problem to tackle. Structure is the way our taxes are done. Structure is the number of jobs that we have. Structure is how hard or difficult or easy it is to get an education. Structure is the way our schools are now set up so that people who want their kids to succeed have to work twice as hard against very difficult odds. Structure is power of the external forces that need to be addressed. And what I'm suggesting is that we as actors in this process need to refocus our efforts on fixing the structural problems, building alliances to do advocacy around the kinds of policies and the kinds of conditions that will allow people to not be poor, that will allow people to make reasonable decisions about whether they should get married or not, or all of the other issues that plague people who don't have enough money to cover everything that they need. So I'm going to stop. And actually, if we want to stay on schedule, there isn't much time, is there?
There's plenty of time. Plenty of time. None of us own it. We just have